You are listening to Dove Valley Deep Divers with Erick Trickel
and Lance Sanderson.
Ball comes out of the hands of Newton. It's on the ground, picked up by T.J. Ward at the 4-yard line. Vaughn Miller did it again.
On Overtime Media.
And it looks like we're live. We're going to let Chad get Facebook set up and ready to go for us. We'll let this breathe for a second. So we got, 5 good green check marks. Looks like we're pretty much good to go. There it is. Mile high hello, everybody in Broncos country, and welcome into another episode of the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. I'm your host, Lance Sanderson, and joining me, as per usual, is my good friend and colleague. He's your Denver Broncos insider and Mile High Huddle senior NFL draft analyst, the one and only Erick Trickel. Erick, what's going on, my dude? How you feeling? I know you're not really feeling too hot right now, a little under the weather. I am as well, so it's going to be interesting. Erick, what's up, man?
Fortunately, it was just food poisoning yesterday and just dealing with that. I think that on top of stress of other stuff going on, this week has just been not the best week for me, man. I'm so tired. I'm so drained. But I'm excited to be here talking about football. We're going to try to make it through an hour, guys, but we're both feeling a little under the weather. So We might end up having to call it a little bit short. Depends on how it goes, depends on how we're feeling. But I'm trying to feel better. Just taking it one day at a time, man.
I hear you on that. I woke up this morning and was really, really not able to breathe very well, and everything. I went and got tested today, so we're waiting on that to see how that goes. So if I do cough a lot, guys, apologies for that. So, but anyways, today, guys, just before we get started here, want to remind you all, you guys are watching the Dove Valley Deep Divers. You guys can follow us on Twitter. You can by finding me at Sanderson MHH and for Erick at Erick Trickel. Also, guys, while you're at it, follow the podcast account at DVDD_pod. Also at Mile High Huddle. That's the Muddler account. It's the easiest way to keep in tune with what's going on with Mile High Huddle in general. Any breaking news and analysis articles from your favorite Mile High Huddle personality, the Huddle Up Podcast Network in general. If you guys are following that, you're not going to miss out on anything. And guys, this podcast is brought to you today by sportsbetting.com. sportsbetting.com/Mile High Huddle. Broncos country, gambling is now legal in the state of Colorado, and here's what makes sportsbetting.com a no-brainer for sports fans. They have sharp odds and low juice, which means that they have in-house bookmakers, and they're not a third-party provider of odds, which means reduced juice and the best prices online. They have hassle-free bonuses, including a one-time rollover, meaning that the bonus money is yours after you bet it one time, and other sites typically range from anywhere from 5 to 30 times. They also have 24/7 live customer support, and there's always a real person to speak to within the United States. But here's the kicker. At sportsbetting.com, you guys can get a 100% risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000. Not just one bet, but all of your bets. So play for a week, and if your losses exceed your winnings at the end of the week, sportsbetting.com will cover 100% of the difference up to $1,000 with a one-time rollover. So guys, head on over to www.sportsbetting.com/Mile High Huddle. That's www.sportsbetting.com/Mile High Huddle and capitalize on a risk-free week of sports betting up to $1,000.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Broncos country, listen up. Coors Hard Seltzer, it's not your average seltzer because rooted in Coors' long history of sustainability is a brand inspired by a generation that wants to do good in the world with a mission to restore America's rivers. It used to be if you wanted to make an impact, you wanted to make a difference in the world, you'd have to get off your butt, you'd have to go out there and do something. With Coors Hard Seltzer, they're making it all the easier to make that impact. And the way they're doing it is by launching the world's easiest volunteer program. Whatever you're doing, by simply cracking open a can of Coors Hard Seltzer, you're volunteering because our waterways are at risk. 80% of America's rivers are drying up. But through a partnership with Change the Course, Coors Hard Seltzer is helping to protect and restore America's rivers. Each 12-pack of Coors Hard Seltzer, this is how it works, restores 500 gallons of fresh water to U.S. rivers and the communities that depend on them. And the way it shakes out is 1 billion gallons of water restored to 16 river basins across the U.S., including the Colorado River. And that's just year one. Plus, with Coors Hard Seltzer, you get 4 refreshing flavors, 1 cool cause. Enjoy naturally flavored black cherry, mango, lemon lime, and grapefruit. And the specs are in, gang. Coors Hard Seltzer is 4.5% ABV and only 90 calories.
Shad, I know for a fact, watching that Broncos-Chargers game in the first half, I needed a few Coors Hard Seltzers to get me by. But after that wild comeback victory, I'm celebrating with my Coors Hard Seltzer in the best possible occasion.
So, gang, join the world's easiest volunteer program. By simply drinking Coors Hard Seltzer, you can volunteer to restore America's rivers. You buy Coors Hard Seltzer, you help restore 500 gallons of water into America's rivers. It is that simple. So, visit CoorsSeltzer.com to find a Coors Hard Seltzer near you. That's CoorsSeltzer.com.
For every 12-pack sold through 8/31/2021, Coors will purchase services from Change the Course to restore 500 gallons of fresh river water. Details at CoorsSeltzer.com. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Fort Worth, Texas.
Now today, guys, really fun show for you guys today. The Broncos actually just managed to make one of the greatest comebacks in team history. In fact, it was the 5th time ever that the Broncos came back from a 21-point deficit in any game ever, going all the way back to 1960. And Drew Lock and the Broncos offense was absolutely spectacular in that. So I want to see what's kind of going forward. Eric, go ahead.
Real quick, I just got a question is, what comeback was better, this one or the Peyton Manning one back at what year was that?
2012.
Yeah, or that one, the one with the big Tony Carter interception.
Yeah,
I think it was.
Yeah, Tony Carter had a pick six. Chris Harris Jr. had a pick six. Peyton Manning threw 3 second-half touchdown passes. That game probably just in and of itself, because where the Broncos were at. And I want to draw some parallels here, and this is the biggest thing. The Broncos offense that day was absolutely struggling. They went into the game at 2-3. The Broncos went into this last game at 2-4 against the Chargers. And in both scenarios, the Broncos were down big at halftime, and they ended up having a 21-point second half deficit to overcome, and they both managed to get it done. But the thing about it is, the way that the Broncos defense played against Phillip Rivers and that Chargers team in 2012 was far and away more spectacular than what the Broncos defense was able to do against Justin Herbert, because the Chargers offense in the fourth quarter put over 100 yards up alone of total offense. And they actually had another opportunity to score another touchdown. Bryce Callahan had a huge interception there. But what the Broncos were able to do, coming down 24-0 at halftime, and to go back and win that game and shut out the Chargers in the second half, was absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, see, I like this comeback a little bit better. I mean, it was Peyton Manning the last time, but he every now and then he seemed to have those games where he was just off. And that really seemed to be that game, and the defense came back big. But I think this one, with what it meant to the team, is a little bit bigger. I mean, we've seen everything, all the hate. I mean, last week, how we were with Drew Lock, which the criticism, I know we're going to get a lot of crap for being harsh on him or whatever. To me, in my eyes, it was more than fair criticism. And against this Chargers team, for 3 quarters, he looked like he didn't even belong out there on the football field. He had a couple good throws, and that was it. And then that fourth quarter, it all just changed. It all came together. And that is the Drew Lock that we want to see. That's the Drew Lock that gives us hope that he can be the guy for the future.
Right.
And I think that reason, to me, is why I like this comeback one a little bit more than the other one. I mean, again, it just goes back to the quarterback situation. One was Peyton Manning. We knew how great he could be. This one is one that now we have hope that maybe Drew Lock can still be the guy. I still want to see it for a full game. I want to see it against a team that doesn't collapse and blow 16-plus point leads 4 weeks in a row.
Yep.
And a team that has a little bit better of a secondary to challenge him a little bit more. But it was a good game to start and bounce back from, or at least good quarter to bounce back from the previous 7 quarters prior to it.
Yeah, and I guess that's my biggest thing in this entire deal is that, it was a great showing from Drew Lock, and now we've got 10 games worth of him starting. He's 6-4 as a starter, and we won't count the Pittsburgh game because he didn't play all that much, and when he was playing, he wasn't playing great. But anyway, 6-3 as a starter. If we take that game away, he's still figuring out a way to win football games with this team. And even though it hasn't been the greatest performances in the world, except for 3.5 total quarters, really? Go back and watch all of his games. You have the fourth quarter against the Chargers in the last 3 minutes of the third quarter there, and then the first half against Houston and the first half of the third quarter against Houston. Combine that, we have one game, pretty much one total game of Drew Lock actually playing quality quarterback play, and it's hard for me to trust that moving forward. But I do agree with you on this one. It did give me that other hope that he actually figured it out. He made the adjustment. adjustment. He started stepping up in the pocket, going through his progressions. The offense got a little bit easier for him to read. He kind of settled in, and he showed those flashes, the ones that we want to see more often of, I can make any throw across the field, and I can still become the quarterback of the future for this franchise. Now, to move this conversation forward to what we were going to be talking about today was what the Broncos have with draw the same parallels to this. Again, this game gets the Broncos to 3-4 going into week 8. They have the Atlanta Falcons coming up this week at 2-6, and they're a team again that blows a bunch of big leads. They've done it 3 times this year as well, and they have the worst defense in the NFL pretty much. I mean, they're absolutely terrible defensively. This is a game that Drew Light can really expand upon that fourth quarter from last week and really put this Broncos in the right direction. If they win against Atlanta, they're sitting at 4-4 at week 8 at the halfway point of the season, or excuse me, week 9. They have a chance to actually go into the playoffs. Now, Eric, I know we wanted to talk about this just a little bit, but I'm going to let you go ahead and start it off.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing is they got to overcome the Falcons. This is a game that that has all the looks to me of a trap game. And I know a few weeks ago, you and I, we had this conversation of being a trap game, but the Broncos have shown they can beat bad teams. The combined records of the teams they've beaten are 4-18. We know they can beat the bad teams. The Falcons are a bad team. We got to see what they can do against good teams where it hasn't been as pretty, but that's neither here nor there at this moment of this conversation. So they got to go in against this Falcons team that the offense is actually playing pretty solid football for the most part. Matt Ryan is actually having a pretty solid year. I mean, statistically, he leads the NFL in passing. I think his touchdown to interception ratio is 12-4. He's not taking a lot of sacks. He's not being over aggressive, but he's not being super complacent as we've seen in previous years. So he's playing more confined in himself in the scheme, and it's seeing him be a little bit better. They've got some talented receivers. That offensive line is a solid line, not a great line. Their running game is where they're really lacking. And this is a team that that easily could be 4-4. I mean, Todd Gurley doesn't score the touchdown against the Lions. There's a win there, and they don't fail on recovering a punt because they're idiots. There's another win there, or an onside kick. I mean,
kick against Dallas.
Yeah, against Dallas. And obviously it's a what if situation here, but they're close to being a better record than they are. It's just they can't stop shooting themselves in the foot. Well, the Broncos, they can't stop shooting themselves in the foot either. So this game to me is really going to come down to which team shoots themselves in the foot less. And I'm trusting the coaching of Vic Fangio. We've seen him improve each game, especially his clock management. The clock management against the Chargers was not perfect, but it was really good. It was really smart. So they just got to stop shooting themselves in the foot. I trust them a lot more to do that than, who is it, Raheem Morris?
Yep.
He's the interim coach there. I trust Vic Fangio not to have them shoot themselves in the foot so much. Falcons, everybody knows they're headed for a complete rebuild. They're going to basically blow everything up. Don't be surprised if Julio Jones is gone, Matt Ryan's gone. Basically, everybody's gone, and they start all over after this season. Yeah. I think the Broncos are trending upwards, Falcons trending downwards. I think that this is a game that the Broncos pull out, and they end up going into Week 10 with this 4-4 record. Right, 4-4.
Yeah, it would be 4-4 if the Broncos win against Atlanta. And I just want to throw some things out here really fast. This is a very winnable game for the Broncos, especially offensively. The Atlanta defense has given up 410 total yards per game. It's the 5th worst mark in the NFL. And they have the 2nd worst passing defense at 311.4 yards passing allowed per game this year, 2nd worst in the NFL. So this is why I want to see where Drew Lock is able to do and start attacking some of these guys like Isaiah Oliver, who has been absolutely atrocious here, guys. Isaiah Oliver, he may lead the team in pass breakups with 5, but his 215 yards allowed after the catch is the most in the NFL, period. He has 4 touchdowns allowed, which is the 2nd most in the NFL, the 3rd highest passer rating against at 135.8. The 7th highest yards per coverage snap, and high on this one is not a good thing. the 7th highest yards per coverage snap of 1.6. So the Broncos are, and he actually has a really high completion percentage too. I forgot to pull that, but I saw it. It's in the 70s, like 70% completion percentage against in coverage. He's been playing as a bottom 5 cornerback in the NFL. And the Broncos, to me, I want to see them go out and get Jerry Jeudy rolling against Isaiah Oliver, because he's not very good in space. He's not very good tackling after the catch and whatnot. So where Jerry Jeudy excels is obviously creating some separation, and then his ability to make plays after the catch down the field. That's the biggest matchup to me to watch offensively, other than Grady Jarrett versus Lloyd Cushenberry. And Grady Jarrett has been an absolute monster. He's the 3rd highest total pressures in the NFL this year with 30, behind only Aaron Donald, who's going to be the defensive player of the year again this year, and Stephon Tuitt, who has 39. He only has 3 sacks this year, but he's got a good matchup this week because the Broncos' interior offensive line, specifically Lloyd Cushenberry and Austin Slopeman, because I'm not sure if Graham Glasgow is going to be able to play with the whole being on. I'm not sure if he's available or not. Anyways, Lloyd Cushenberry struggled massively against elite interior pass rushers, especially against Chris Jones. You go back to the game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Casey Hayward, Stephon Tuitt as well. They both went and took it to Lloyd Cushenberry. Grady Jarrett's that good of a player, and he can do it again. However, Lloyd Cushenberry's actually shown some pretty marked improvement, and I thought he was spectacular in the 4th quarter of that Chargers game. He's only allowed 2 pressures per game in his last 3 starts and only 1 sack in the last 4 games. So the improvement for Lloyd is actually starting to grow. And I understand you got rookie center struggles. It's a hard position to come to, but that to me is the other one. It's Grady Jarrett versus Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yeah, that's definitely a big matchup to watch. And it was actually almost my rookie to watch. And what changed it away for me a little bit is that Cushenberry is playing a little bit better, but with so much uncertainty next to him with Glasgow and everything, I just didn't want to go that way. I think that this would be is actually a little bit better of a matchup for him than previous. This reason is the length. Grady Jarrett, one of his big knocks was that he wasn't super long. His arms are a little bit shorter,
right?
And so Lloyd Cushenberry, he falls into that. He doesn't have these super long arms or anything. If I remember correctly, I might be mistaken on that. And I mean, Chris Jones, everybody talks about how long he is. Stephon Tuitt, he's a long guy. I mean, Vita Vea, even though he's big, he had some decent length to him. And these are all guys that beat up Cushenberry because he was struggling to get his hands on him early. I think Grady Jarrett I still think Grady Jarrett will get a lot of wins, but I think that the length matchup here is, for lack of a better way to put it, for Lloyd Cushenberry.
Yeah. That is actually a pretty good point. I didn't think about that, but that is a very good point. Now, moving to the defensive side of the football before we break down the schedule and whatnot here, Broncos actually got a pretty bad piece of information regarding their injury report today, as A.J. Bouye is expected to miss this week's game as he's coming out of concussion protocol. But the Broncos might also catch a break on that aspect because Calvin Ridley, the wide receiver from the Atlanta Falcons, has a foot injury. He's questionable to play. He did not participate in practice all week. So it sounds like the Broncos might catch a break there defensively by not having Calvin Ridley. However, with A.J. Bouye out, that puts the big onus on Michael Ojemudia and Justin Simmons in bracket coverage, specifically on big number 11, Julio Jones. And if Julio Jones is able to take control of this game in the passing game, the Broncos are going to be in serious trouble because the Atlanta Falcons, despite not having a great running game, they do a good job building off of the deep passing with play action passing as well. And then that opens up their running game just a little bit better. And Todd Gurley, who's been struggling this year, he's been dealing with some injuries and whatnot. Brian Hill, my guy from Wyoming, though, has been playing pretty good football. He's a pretty decent receiver out of the backfield, too. He has a couple drops, but not bad. But no, if you get run over by Julio Jones, which is it's the easiest adjustment in the world, that's the one thing you have to do: circle number 11, find out where he's at, and double coverage him in bracket coverage. Ojemudia and Justin Simmons are going to have their work cut out for him though, because he is a monster.
Yeah, and we talked about this a little bit before going live, and you mentioned originally about Bryce Callahan being on him, and I just want to talk about that briefly. And you don't really want Bryce Callahan on Julio Jones, just because there's such a size mismatch there. And Julio Jones is known for bullying bigger receivers. He's going to bully smaller or bigger corners. He's going to bully smaller corners as well. Ojemudia, he's a little bit bigger. He's a little bit more physical. I think he can hang in there a little bit more with Julio Jones than Bryce Callahan can. But the caveat of that is that you have to have Justin Simmons or Kareem Jackson right there with him. And as you said, bracketing him, that's your best bet. And then with, I think it's Russell Gage and Olamide Zaccheaus, or however you say his name, that's where you want Asong Bossy and Bryce Callahan to be. They're a little bit quicker route runners, which just is not Michael Ojemudia's thing. We saw him a couple times get matched up against Keenan Allen, who is a really good route runner, and just completely get destroyed, basically. And I know that last week that Bryce Callahan had a couple good reps against Mike Williams, but Mike Williams is not the receiver Julio Jones is. I mean, that interception that he had against Bryce Callahan, I have no doubt in my mind if Julio Jones was that receiver, Bryce Callahan's not coming down with that football. And to stop in the offense, that's the biggest, is you got to shut down Julio Jones. You got to take away Matt Ryan's favorite receiver, and then you got to get pressure on Matt Ryan.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Rich coming in here with actually a pretty nuanced take here, because if you actually do recall, Julio Jones is not a big fan of big hits. He doesn't like contact. He's a big physical receiver, which is kind of crazy that he doesn't like to get hit a lot. But he definitely doesn't like to get shots to the ribs. So that's a very good thing. Let's go through this chat really fast and answer some of these questions before we get going on to the rest of the schedule for the Broncos and potentially if they can get into the playoffs. Let's see here. There was a couple of ones that I saw. I think James was asking about the injury report and if Philip Lindsay was going to play. And according to Vic Fangio, who gave the injury report today, Philip Lindsay, let's see here, Nick Van Nett, Trey Marshall, Tim Patrick, and Bryce Callahan are all listed as questionable, but they're all trending towards playing, specifically Callahan, Phil, and Nick Van Nett. Now, the other one, aside from A.J. Bouye, that's a big blow to the Broncos, is potentially losing Shelby Harris, who is on the reserve list right now with all that. Not that he's tested positive or anything like that, but he was a close contact, so they're trying to figure that out. Vic Fangio actually said that he would, if the game was a Monday game, he would probably be able to play just so they can continue to do some contract tracing and stuff like that. But it sounds like Shelby Harris right now is less than 50-50 to play on Sunday. So that's a big blow to the Broncos defense, especially in the running game, because Shelby Harris has been playing spectacular this year against the run.
Yeah, and not having Mike Purcell already, a lot's going to fall on Deshaun Williams, he's been solid, but there's some moments where you can tell that he isn't a starter in the NFL. I think he's shown he has a role as a backup, but you just want a little bit more. Sylvester Williams, he's completely just getting destroyed. Draymond Jones, he has his moments against the run, but he's definitely showing a little bit more as a pass rusher. Yeah. And DeMarcus Walker, whom I have been extremely hard on for his run defense over previous years, he's actually been very solid as a run defender this year.
Yep.
But the thing is he's not working the middle. He's working a little bit more towards the edge of that. And the middle is where the loss of Shelby Harris and the loss of Mike Purcell hurt even more. Yep. So it's kind of going to be who gives first. I mean, this is a Broncos run defense that they got gashed a few times last week, even with Shelby Harris. And this is a Falcons running game that struggles at times. So it's going to be interesting to see who ends up winning there, or who ends up doing the least bad there, I guess would be the best way to put it.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I want to see how Deshaun Williams actually continues to grow, because he's been playing pretty good football, at least in my opinion, especially in the running game too. So that's probably the biggest one to step in for Shelby Harris is going to be Deshaun Williams, if that's not already pretty much what's going on as it is with Mike Purcell being out. But still with Shelby Harris, that's the guy you really need to watch out is Deshaun Williams. Yeah. Let's grab some of these super chats really fast, and then we'll get back to the conversation. Stu Meat coming in here with the $5 super sticker. We appreciate that, buddy. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
See here. Pardon me, guys. Christopher coming in here on YouTube with the super chat as well. For my buddy Eric, I hope you feel better, brother. Thanks, man. We appreciate that. Thanks for joining the show, guys.
No, we hope Lance feels better. I'm on the downward slope of this. I had most of the brunt of what I had is yesterday. It's just mainly exhaustion right now. Lance is just getting into it. We all hope Lance starts to feel better.
Yeah, kind of struggling right now, honestly. Yeah. Charlie Beagle says, you can't trap us. We're not doing great right now. Well, actually, if you kind of look at what is going on with the Denver Broncos, they've won 3 out of their last 4 games. So 3 out of 4 is doing pretty good. That's playing pretty good football. And you don't want to walk into a game where against a 2-6 team that's been struggling to stop teams offensively and put up a dud like they did against the Kansas City Chiefs for the first 3 quarters against the Chargers. Like that's the trap right there, is walking in here and seeing that they're one of the worst teams in football and that you are coming off of a big high. You just scored 21 points in the fourth quarter. 3 big back-to-back-to-back touchdown passes. That's the trap. That's where, and I understand this is Eric and I kind of talked about this at length after I'd mentioned, the Jets game being a trap game. Like, this is a team it's a terrible team. The Broncos shouldn't walk in there and expect that they're going to end up just walking all over the Jets. They did. But what happened on the very first possession? Sam Darnold had a 47-yard rushing touchdown on the very first possession. Like that's what I'm talking about. You don't play down to your opponent in a trap game. That's my thing of a trap game. Is don't overlook your opponent and don't play down to their level, because if the Broncos play badly in the passing game against this team, they're going to let the Falcons hang around, and that passing offense is going to start teeing off on this Broncos passing defense, which is actually playing good football. But that's what we're talking about there. And those are the facts, Flippin' Booch. Like that's how that one works. James Campbell says that Atlanta is a better team under Raheem Morris. He's auditioning for a role too, and this is a good point. It makes them dangerous. Certainly a big test of where the Broncos are at.
I'll just say Raheem Morris isn't actually getting serious consideration for the head coaching job there.
Well, maybe not a job as a head coach in Atlanta, but maybe as a head coach somewhere else where
he'll get looked at as a coordinator.
Right. All right. So, Eric, let's move this conversation forward here. You have the Broncos. Do you have the Broncos winning this game against Atlanta, or do you have them losing it? Because this is going to be kind of the guide of our conversation here.
I have them winning.
You have them winning. I have the Broncos winning as well. Our score predictions are up at milehighhuddle.com. Go check those out if you guys get a chance. I have the Broncos winning 28-24. I think is what I put that one down.
I think I want to say like 34-23. It's a weird score that I ended up coming up with, but there's a whole mathematical thing.
I was going to say your projection scale is so weird, but all right. So that puts the Broncos at 4-4 going into their Week 10 game against the Las Vegas Raiders, and this game is on the road in the new stadium for the Raiders. That's a tough team to play right now. That's a team that nobody really wants to play right now. And I understand they go out to Cleveland. They only scored 13 points or something like that. The wind was just howling. Nobody could throw the ball. They couldn't kick the ball. I mean, there was a kick that I saw. I think it was a Raiders kicker that kicked a field goal, and the ball flew like 30 yards in the wrong direction because the wind was blowing so hard. But they're running the ball highly effectively. They have a really good offensive line. Colton Miller, who I've been highly critical of at the left tackle position for them, has been playing really good football this year. He's a lot like Garrett Bowles, and it has that rebound and is starting to play quality left tackle play. For all the hate that Derek Carr gets, I still don't understand it. He's got this team playing at a high level offensively. They're starting to use Henry Ruggs a little bit more effectively. The thing is, that defensive secondary is not playing good football. So, to me, I have it written down as a loss just because I have it on the road. It's on the road, but that's a game that I think the Broncos can win if they can continue this offensive explosion passing the football.
And my concern for them, and it's a kind of a concern against Atlanta, is the tight ends. And I think that if they want to beat the Raiders, they got to figure out a way to get those tight ends involved. But they do have better news against the Raiders than they do the Falcons. The Falcons, their two cover linebackers are number 1 and number 4 in snaps per reception allowed, which the higher the number, the better. And they're actually both playing extremely good football, and especially in coverage. They're shutting down tight ends. I mean, teams are averaging a total of 64 passing yards to tight ends on a per game basis, which is like, I want to say it's like 7th fewest. It's somewhere around there. I looked it up earlier. I can't remember what it is. But the Raiders, though, is they went and made some big additions to their linebacker core, and they're not playing up to par. Corey Littleton was a guy that a lot of Bronco fans, myself included, wanted, but he's really struggling this year. That Wade Phillips scheme really covered up his issues that he had in coverage, and now he's getting exposed. And I think that's where Noah Fant and Albert Okwuegbunam can really help out against this Las Vegas Raiders. But it all comes down to stopping that offense. And with Josh Jacobs, with Darren Waller, with Henry Ruggs, it's just there's so many mismatches against this Broncos defense. It's going to be interesting to see what they do. I don't think Denver's will be able to pull it away. But, of course, there's still a week between now and then. But for now, I think this is one where Denver loses.
So let's just call it both a loss. That puts the Broncos at 4-5.
Yeah.
right there. And that's also 1 and 2 in the division, by the way, as well. The next week against the Miami Dolphins, starting Tua Tagovailoa in that offense that looked absolutely atrocious against the Los Angeles Rams. But here's the kicker. That defense is playing an extremely high level of football right now. They're taking the ball away a lot. They had 2 interceptions. I believe one of them was a pick 6 against Jared Goff. They had 2 forced fumbles as well, and they got a punt return for a touchdown against those Los Angeles Rams. And we all know the Broncos' coverage woes on special teams right now. This, to me, is a game that's going to come down to what the Broncos' defense can do, though, and limiting what the Miami Dolphins' offense is capable of doing. I have it marked down as a win right now. But I'm going to see how this kind of plays out a little bit more, because Miami's sitting at 4-3 right now. They have a better record than the Broncos, and they've actually been playing some pretty good football. It's kind of a surprise to me that they went to Tua Tagovailoa in the first place, because Ryan Fitzpatrick was playing really good football. But I have it as a win right now, but this is another one that I could flip the script on and call this a loss for the Broncos as well.
Well, I find it interesting that you mentioned Ryan Fitzpatrick and how he was playing and them going to Tua. Well, the big reason is they got that first-round pick from the Texans that's looking like a top 5 pick currently at the moment. So guess what they're doing? They're throwing him out there to the Wolves, seeing what he can do, seeing what growth he can show. And if he fails, guess what? That's probably it. They're going to Josh Rosen him, yank the rug out from underneath his feet, and go find a different quarterback. They're not wanting to be overly patient. This is his chance. Go out there, go prove it, or don't. Whatever happens, that's going to decide what happens with the future of the quarterback position. And I think that against the Broncos, I think Tua is going to have a rough game. I mean, against Justin Herbert, we saw him struggle at times against this Vic Fangio defense. And there are 2 defensive-minded coaches in the NFL that you really don't want to face when you're inexperienced. That's Bill Belichick and that's Vic Fangio.
Yep.
Those 2, they frustrate so many young quarterbacks, and I think that we're going to see it again against Tua Tagovailoa. And it's going to cause issues. It's going to create turnovers. I think the Broncos will turn the ball over as well. But I think that it's just going to become a battle of what quarterback can make more plays. At this point, I think Drew Lock will be able to make a few more plays because he's a little bit more experience and not going against one of these toughest defenses to go against for an inexperienced quarterback.
Yeah, and I understand that Justin Herbert had a pretty decent game against the Broncos, but
he still threw 2 interceptions.
And one of them was extremely costly because it allowed the Broncos to march right back down the field and go score a touchdown. So this defense is just so complicated. It's complicated to even kind of describe to you guys. Like that's the hard thing, is you can't exactly describe it to you because there's so many different moving pieces. It's impossible to kind of describe exactly what every responsibility is. I did some research on that a while ago. In fact, I actually kind of broke it down for you guys a few weeks ago towards the beginning of the season. And it's just so incredibly difficult to make a correct read on something like that when there's guys flipping off into zone. There's different man coverage schemes underneath that's going on. There's a bunch of different ways that guys are pushing towards the boundary, passing off responsibilities over the middle of the field. It's just incredibly difficult to see that. And I'm kind of waiting to see what Tua's going to be able to do with that. I have that as a win for right now.
This is the Overtime Podcast Network.
Week after that, the Broncos have the New Orleans Saints at home. And that, to me, is a big loss. And that's not going to be a close loss. It's going to be a big loss. The New Orleans, I like their defense a little bit better. Their offense is kind of struggling right now, but Alvin Kamara is doing some crazy things out there. And, it's not going to be good. And I imagine they'll have Michael Thomas back by then. Emmanuel Sanders is playing some decent football. Traquan Smith as well. Jared Cook's a great tight end running up the seam and whatnot. I don't think that the Broncos are going to have enough firepower to hang out with that Saints offense unless Drew Brees continues to struggle. That's the kicker there.
I'll start this off by saying I could definitely see this as being a trap game for the Saints.
That's fair.
They could overlook the Broncos, especially if they have some issues over the next few weeks as things still click and everything and come together. But in the end, I don't think that the Broncos walk away with this one. I mean, a lot can change between now and then. That's the issue with this, is we're looking at the future schedule because we want to see if, with what we know of the Broncos at this point, do they have a realistic shot at making the playoffs now? So it's a question of we're kind of projecting a little bit what we think they'll do, and it just comes down to it is I don't think this defense against Drew Brees and his brains And I know he's making a lot of mistakes right now, but he's reminding me very much of that 2015 Peyton Manning, that he wasn't playing the best football, but he was doing enough to help the Broncos offense win games or score enough points, and then obviously carried by the defense. And the Saints defense, it's not as great as that Broncos defense was by no means. It's still a very solid unit. I think that they have easier paths to take advantage of this Broncos offense that just help out the Saints offense a little bit, which is why I don't see Denver winning this one. But it is one that, again, I definitely can see as being a trap game for the Saints.
Yeah, and that really it all comes down to me again, the way that Drew Brees is playing football right now. He just looks old. He doesn't look like he's throwing the ball around the yard like he used to be doing. And with that Broncos secondary as hockey as it is in the backside and taking the football away, at least is what they can do. Anything that's fluttering in that complex coverage scheme could be taken the other way. I'm going to grab a couple of super chats here. There was actually one from Dylan Von Arks. I'm not seeing it anymore. I think this stream kind of jumped on us, and I know he was saying just showing us some love and thanks for the great analysis, Dylan. Thanks for joining in on us. I would pull it and do the banner and whatnot, but I'm not exactly sure how to do that. Based Gates jumping in here, and he says. Maybe this is the greatest profile picture. Let's talk coverage linebackers in the draft. Thoughts on Owusu, Parsons, and Dylan Moses? Why are most mocks assuming we will take a corner? I don't see it. Eric, I'm going to let you go ahead and take this one away.
I really like Micah Parsons. More and more, though, I hear a lot of talk about him being an edge in the NFL and not an off-ball linebacker. And one reason why I can see this is when I watch him, his play style reminds me quite a bit of Alexander Johnson. There are some concerns in coverage that we're not going to get to see this year. There are concerns with him filling the right holes, right lanes sometime against the run. He's a big physical guy, but one of the things he does really well is blitzing the quarterback. So if he does stay as an off-ball linebacker, I could definitely see him kind of playing a Alexander Johnson type role. Limited coverage usage, very good against the run, but used so much and utilized so much as a blitzer. But again, that's a big reason why I'm hearing a lot of edge talk for him. Dylan Moses, I like quite a bit. I think of the top two linebackers, Parsons and him, I like him a little bit more in coverage. I have a little bit more concerns of him against the run. And then Owusu, trying to think who that is. The name escapes me at the moment. I want to say I really can't place the name right now. But there are this is actually a really good linebacker class. I really like it overall. There's definitely multiple guys in here that can come in and have a role in the NFL, have a coverage specialist role. One guy that I really liked that I was a little bit bummed to find out that he actually already committed to returning to Texas A&M last year is Anthony Heinz. He's a guy that I'd be looking forward for the 2022 draft already. But there's a couple other guys. And this might be a Owusu. There's a Notre Dame kid that's kind of a safety linebacker hybrid. And then there is I'm trying to think of what his name is. He transferred out of North Dakota to Jabril Cox. He's another linebacker that I'm really keeping my eye on. And I think that he could have I don't think he'd ever be like a top 5 linebacker, but I definitely think he'd be the top 15, top 10 type linebacker in this and fit extremely well into Vic Fangio's defense.
Isn't there a kid from North Carolina State that's playing pretty good football too? I can't remember his name. I know there's a kid in the ACC that's playing really good football. Anyways, I can't remember. Chris Valdez coming in here and says 1 week at a time, boys will be 4-4 this week and headed in the right direction. We need to feed number 30. That's a good point. Philip Lindsay has been probably the Broncos' best offensive player not named Garrett Bowles. Like, quite honestly, he has been absolutely spectacular. When he's on the field, the offense clicks better. The 55-yard touchdown run against the Chargers to start things off. Before he had that concussion, it was like 7 carries for 79 yards against the Chiefs or something like that. Like, absolutely spectacular running the football. And it's starting to – I'm not going to say it like this, but like I mean it like this, but it's starting to make that Melvin Gordon taste a little bit more bitter in your mouth when you watch Philip Lindsay run and have the success that he has. I understand that they're two different players and they're two different roles in this offense. But it does. I mean, Philip Lindsay was the guy, and he was running really well last year. It's back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, and it does taste just a little bit worse in your mouth when you see Philip Lindsay going out there and rushing for 79, 80, 100 yards a game. He was over 100 in this
definitely
Patriots game. And then Melvin Gordon's just rushing he had that big game against New York Jets, bolstered by a 48-yard touchdown run in the game. And he's running like 3.5 yards a carry right now.
Has a couple fumbles and that bad flea flicker.
Yep.
I definitely agree with what you're saying. My only thing is that Denver doesn't beat the Chargers without Melvin Gordon too.
That's very fair.
And it's
a great receiver out of the backfield.
Yeah, it's a thing of that they want them to be a complementary duo, but they can't. Philip Lindsay can't stay out there on the field. And I mean, the concussion, the hit from Daniel Sorensen, that was one that I still question a little bit. Part of me really thinks, and I hate thinking this way, that it was a little bit intentional to knock him out of the game because of how badly he was gashing that Chiefs defense. But it should be that they do need to change up how they are using these running backs. It needs to stop being Melvin Gordon's 1A and Philip Lindsay's 1B. It needs to be Philip Lindsay is 1 and Melvin Gordon is 2. Not this 1A, 1B thing anymore. Mm-hmm. It needs to be clear 1 and 2 with Philip Lindsay being the guy. But the thing is with Philip Lindsay too is this is now his third injury this year. He had that turf toe, he had that concussion, and now he jammed some toes. And I mean, all of them, they're not a concussion is kind of a major injury, but he was able to come back and play the following week. But it's just beating up on his body, and he's not the biggest guy. So the questions, and he has a lot of mileage on his tires already, and now we're wanting him to get more carries. He wants a big deal. Like, it's just all working against Philip Lindsay getting that big deal. So it's going to raise some questions about what they do going forward. I think that after this year, Melvin Gordon should go bye-bye. But and until then, they just got to switch up how they're using him.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. King Kirk coming in here with a $10 super. He says, I understand both of your opinions and you agree to a degree, but we cannot sit here and project wins and losses weeks ahead. If and when Drew goes off this Sunday, anything is possible. Top quarterback play equals wins. And I understand your point there, King, and I appreciate you for joining the show. We needed a good idea to try to go through quickly tonight because neither one of us are feeling too hot. This was a way for us to be able to do that. I do apologize. It sounds like a cop-out, but I'm really struggling to keep my breath going right now. So it's been rough this last probably 24 hours. So
and for me, sorry to interrupt, for me, it's been a rough week. I got barely any chance to do any film work on the Falcons. I barely got my grades done. I mean, on top of not feeling well, that was only yesterday and today. There's other stuff going on personally that just made this week really rough. So we just kind of came up with something that we could talk about, make it really easy. Didn't require a lot of film study on our part because if we really want to break down the upcoming opponents, but we can't do that very well if we don't really watch them. Like, I know the basic stuff against the Falcons, and we're not trying to use it as an excuse. And it's just a thing of we just didn't have the time to do the work necessary to put on a good show that really stays in that name of Dove Valley Deep Divers. We couldn't do that deep dive into the Falcons. And on top of that is we're not really trying to project it, and we understand that any given Sunday anything can happen. We've seen it happen multiple times, and it's very hard to project, especially if Drew Lock goes off. But even if Drew Lock goes off, it's still hard to project because we don't know which Drew Lock we're going to get. Are we going to get the Drew Lock against the Chiefs? Are we going to get the Drew Lock from that fourth quarter against the Chargers? Are we going to get the Drew Lock from the Patriots, but the receivers from the Patriots as well? Like, it's so hard to project and everything, and we can just go off of what information we have available to us at this time.
Well, and another big thing here is, guys, if Drew Lock doesn't go off on that on that fourth quarter, this conversation doesn't exist anyways.
Yeah.
We're projecting to see if the Broncos can potentially make the playoffs, and that's kind of what I want to get back to here. So right now the Broncos are sitting, based on our projections here, the Broncos are sitting after a New Orleans loss at 5-6. Going to Kansas City in December is probably one of the most difficult places to play in all of the NFL, except for maybe Gillette, like going to New England and playing Gillette. Kansas City in December is it's a terrible place to play, especially for the Broncos. They've struggled there for years and years and years. And I don't see the Broncos being able to stay caught up with the Chiefs this year. They're going to need to have a lot better effort offensively and converting some of those drives that they had into points. Yeah, the Broncos put up 400 yards of total offense, but they only put up 13 points. Like they got smoked. They got absolutely smoked by that Chiefs team. Patrick Mahomes didn't need to have a Patrick Mahomes style of game. Excuse me. Because the Broncos were so bad offensively, and they had a couple of that interception return for a touchdown. They had the kickoff return for a touchdown. There's just so much firepower with that Chiefs team. I don't think the Broncos are going to be able to keep up with them. Eric, do you?
No, I mean, we already saw what happened. I think going into going into Kansas City and everything against all that firepower they have. It's going to be hard to tell because we don't know where the Broncos defense will be. This is about when we might be getting Von Miller back. I think it's a little bit early personally. And depending on how the next 4 weeks go, I'm not sure I would be Miller back this season, but it's all what ifs right now. And just looking at the Chiefs right now, again, there's just so many weapons for them. And we saw the Broncos, we saw them shut down that Chiefs offense, but they didn't really need it, and they were able to run the ball. We didn't need Patrick Mahomes to go off. And now Mike, we had Mike Purcell for that game, didn't we? Or was that the first game?
That was the game that was the game Purcell got hurt.
Yeah, and they still ran the ball on us. Now we don't have Mike Purcell, the best interior run defender on the Broncos. So I just don't see it. I don't see them beating the Chiefs, especially in Kansas City, in Denver.
No, I don't see it either. I mean, you watch what happened with the Broncos rushing defense last week against the Chargers. The Chargers ran for 200 yards, guys, and that was without Mike Purcell, and then you got Shelby
with inconsistent play from the running backs, where it was basically whoever has the hot hand, that's the guy we're going with because nobody's playing extremely well.
Yep. All right, coming out of that back-to-back losses, the Broncos sit at 5-7. They got at Carolina, and this Panthers team is hard to really project against. I have it as a win. I really do. It's going to really depend on the play of Christian McCaffrey as well, because he should be coming back from injury here soon. That's the biggest key there, is if Teddy Bridgewater and Christian McCaffrey can get some things going. But Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore, I actually saw an interesting statistic on the bottom line of NFL Network earlier today. They are the top wide receiver duo as a 1-2 punch. Both of them have over 600 yards receiving as of this point. The number one wide receiver duo in the NFL. It's kind of impressive to me.
Yeah. And I have this one chalked up as a win as well right now, but a lot will depend on Christian McCaffrey. Teddy Bridgewater he's a solid quarterback, but he's not a guy that'll go out and win you games. And it's just against this Fangio defense and everything like that. I'm just not. I don't see it happening, even if Christian McCaffrey has a big game. And there's one comment here I want to grab real quick. And Flip It Booch keeps saying this is the most predictable win for us in Broncos. For the Broncos, and Erick says he doesn't see us winning. If you're talking about the Falcons game, I picked the Broncos to win that game. If that's the game you are talking about, you are flat out wrong saying I don't see us winning. I picked us to win.
Yeah. I understand your point is it's a trap game. I want to grab this one from Joseph Malinowski as well. He just came in, and I want to wish him a happy congratulations on, let's see here. Where did it go?
I got it.
I got it. He says, what's up, everyone? I hope everyone is doing great. Only a few minutes here. Great news. I just got approved on my third house. Going over the paperwork with a lawyer. Just wanted to share great news with the family. So, Joseph, congratulations, man.
Congrats, man.
I'm actually kind of working on trying to get a house bought for me and Samantha and the boys here soon, too. So once we get out of this lease here in the next couple months, I'll probably be able to do that for myself. Now, going back to Carolina, I'm not sure their defense. I know Derek Brown is playing really good football along their defensive interior right now. Brian Burns is actually playing really well coming off the edge as well as a pass rusher. I don't know much about their secondary. Like I said, this is a long time out before we actually really need to worry about that. But I do have the Broncos winning there, getting back and coming in. They're now 6-7. Next week, this is going to be a fun game for the Broncos because they have the Buffalo Bills at home. And Josh Allen and that Bills offense, which you don't know what you're going to get, even more so than the Broncos, because Josh Allen, the first 3 weeks of this season, had been playing gangbusters. He'd been playing so good at the quarterback position, looking like an MVP candidate. And then they lost 2 straight games because Josh Allen looked terrible. He looked like the Josh Allen from his rookie season or even last year, where he was like 52% completion percentage or something like that. Couldn't get anything going in the running game.
Real quick, on that note, I just want to throw this out there. I saw a stat comparison of Josh Allen in September compared to Josh Allen in October, and it's 2 completely different quarterbacks.
Really? Okay.
I can't remember what the stats were, but it was like complete opposite ends of the spectrum for play. I really wish I knew who tweeted that out. It was probably about 2 weeks ago I saw it. But yeah, it was just complete opposite.
Yeah. It was kind of crazy because everyone was like, it's the first month of the season. Like I said, there was people saying that he was going to be in the MVP conversation. Like he was going to, him and Russell Wilson were going to duke this thing out for the rest of the season. And then he had back-to-back games where I don't even think he threw for 200 yards. Like, it was just absolutely atrocious, not playing very good football. But the biggest thing, and we watched this Broncos team play the Bills last season on a blustery day in Buffalo with Brandon Allen throwing the football, and his noodle arm couldn't get the ball driving into the wind. And the Broncos were actually competitive against that Buffalo team. But last year's Buffalo team is a lot different than this year's, because last year's Buffalo team was playing some tremendous defense, whereas this year they're not. So the Broncos have an opportunity to win this game, and in fact, I have them winning this game as of right now to get back to 500, to go 7-7 over and be, right back in the hunt of the playoffs once again.
Yeah, and I actually pulled him up, and Josh Allen, I mean, he threw 10 touchdowns to 1 interception in September, and then he threw 6 touchdowns to 3 interceptions in October, broke 300 yards once in October, broke 300 yards all 3 times in September, including a 415-yard game with a dang near perfect passer rating. I mean, it was, again, it's just completely different. And a big thing for me in this game is, what's the weather going to be? Yeah. If the weather is going to be cold, if it's going to be nasty, similar to kind of how it was last year, I think the Bills win this one because it fits their style a lot better. If it's clean, if it's not windy, if it fits a better passing game, I can see the Broncos winning it. You hit the nail on the head when you mentioned the Bills defense. They are not playing up to the standard that they set last year for themselves. That's not who they are anymore. So this is the Broncos team that they can take advantage of how this defense is playing worse this year if the weather sets it up to be that way. That's what it comes down to. And for me, this is the one game I have a hard time picking because it is so dependent on weather for this one. I'm going to say that the Broncos lose this one right now simply because I think that there will be more on the line for the Bills as they're pushing to try and either better their playoffs, seal their division at this point.
Yep.
But again, weather is just such a factor here. I'm like 51% okay saying that the Bills win it, and I'm 49% wanting to say that it's going to go to the Broncos.
Yep. Happy-go-lucky here is actually bringing up the point that I wanted to say. I'm a little saddened to think Drew isn't a cold-weather Denver quarterback. And look at what happened last year against the Kansas City Chiefs. Look at what happened this year against the Kansas City Chiefs. Both games in the snow, and Drew Lock struggled.
Yep.
So, it's the Kansas City Chiefs. Probably going to struggle against that team, especially last year when the Broncos played Kansas City in Kansas City. Snow game, and that defense was playing lights out towards the end of the season. They were playing so well. That defense actually helped carry them to that Super Bowl win. Don't kid yourselves here at all. But this year again, and they threw for 254 yards, two interceptions, I think, against the Chiefs, and just couldn't get anything going. So if it's a cold weather game and there's snow on the ground, snow flying, the wind's blustering and whatnot, I kind of agree with you on that. That's a good point.
And this is something that I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying, and I know it's coming. But this is an issue where those smaller hands of Drew Locks come into play. Living in Alaska, I know how it feels to throw a football when the weather is not good, when it's cold out, when the ball is wet, when it's snowy out. I know how it is. And the bigger your grip is on the ball, the better. And the reason why it's a concern for Drew Lock is he didn't have that many bad weather games in college to really answer that question. Now in the NFL, he's had 3. And all 3 of them have been poor performances by him. So it's going to be that's part of the concern there with it is just the hand size. Maybe it's something that he starts looking into using a glove for. I don't know, but something's got to happen because the hands are a concern when it comes to bad weather games with Drew Lock, and it's been proven to be the case.
Yeah. Michael Gillespie, I see you asking why we're talking about the Bills game because it's Denver versus Atlanta this week. Yes, we understand that. And if you go back and check out the beginning of the episode, we did give our Atlanta breakdown, at least a brief one. This is a show that we wanted to kind of do a little projection, pump some optimism into Broncos country a little bit, because this next game I have at the Los Angeles Chargers, I have them losing this game to drop to 7-8. But the reason why is because I don't expect the Broncos to be able to repeat the magic that they had this last week, and they're going to have to play a lot better than they did. At this particular point, this is another one of those games that can go back and forth. It doesn't necessarily really matter. I just have it as a loss here because I don't have them sweeping the Chargers. I think Justin Herbert is going to continue to figure it out and be really, really good. And the Chargers defense is going to get a little bit healthier, and they're going to have some guys coming back, and they're going to be able to play a little bit better at their home field against the Broncos and pull out a win right there and potentially even knock the Broncos out of playoff contention here. But that's the game that really need to circle there is the Chargers game, because if they lose that game, 7-8, they might be still on the outside looking in.
So real quick I want to mention this. I know I said 3 games, guys. I misspoke. I meant to just said the wrong number. But yeah, this is a game that it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, I still suspect Justin Herbert will be the quarterback by this point unless he gets hurt or unless the Chargers medical staff decides to kill him or something. Which, real quick, what is with our division opponents with medical staffs? I mean, they almost I don't want to get into that. We're running short on time anyways. And I think that he will have a little bit better this time around against Vic Fangio's defense, having seen it. But I still think that this is a game that the Broncos are going to be able to come back and win. I think if they're pushing for the playoffs here, and what do I have them at this point? Are you keeping track of that?
I don't have you. I think we're at the same. So if you have this one as a win, then you'd have the Broncos at 8-7 here.
So going in, at this game, 7-7 is what I have them as.
Yep.
And I think that I'm pretty sure it's 7-7. It might be 6-7 or 6-8. Not entirely sure, but this is a game where I can see them where they really want to bring Von Miller back, and I think that if they do, that could be a big difference maker when rattling Justin Herbert and everything. So I'm actually going to say that I think the Broncos pull this one out, but I'm going to add the caveat here of it's conditional on if Von Miller plays or not. If Von Miller doesn't play, I think that the Broncos will really have a hard time, as Justin Herbert will have seen Vic Fangio's defense and kind of have some idea of what to do against it.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Now, this last week, this is where it is. Broncos Raiders in Denver, just like last year. And the Broncos need a big win here, and I think they're going to get it. They're going to figure it out this time around. They're going to come out with their A game and figure out a way to stop Josh Jacobs and not let the running game get going, and figure out a way they'll be healthy by that particular point as well. They'll probably get Shelby Harris back. They'll probably who else will they miss? They'll get AJ Bouye back as well. The Broncos against the Raiders, Week 17, that's a win for Denver, and that puts them at 8-8. And depending on how the rest of the AFC shakes out, there's 7 seeds going into the playoffs this year, potentially an 8th seed. 8-8 could get it done, and the Broncos could be back in the playoffs this year at 8-8. Like that's my thing is they got to play some good football. They got to beat some tough teams. They got to beat the Bills. They got to beat the Carolina Panthers. Miami's a game that they don't necessarily know that they're going to win that game. But there's another couple of wins in there as well. They could beat the Raiders twice. They could beat the Chargers again in week 16. I mean, 8-8. If you're looking at the Broncos at 8-8 right now, sitting right at playoff contention, I think you've got to be pretty happy with that, especially after an 0-3 start.
Yeah, I think that this is one that I'm going to also say that the Broncos win. Originally, before we went live, I was saying that I think the Broncos lose this one, but I've been kind of thinking about it. And I think that after seeing what the Raiders will be doing earlier on, and where I have them losing, I think that they'll better prepare for them to come back and handle this game a little bit more towards the end of the season. And I think that the playoffs will be on the line here for both teams, which often leads to great matchups. Denver has a tendency does often come out on top on these ones.
Yep.
So I think that that's a big thing. And I think that the biggest thing is that Drew Lock, I think that he will rise to the occasion if playoffs are on the line. And I think Vic Fangio will want to, because I think the Broncos will want to make a statement of saying, hey, we started off rough. We dealt with all these injuries, but we turned it around. We went 9-7. We got that winning record, and they continue to improve over the last few years as they have. Just slightly, but it's a step in the right direction. And depending on how the rest of the thing goes, it could put them right there in the playoffs.
Yeah. Interesting question here. I'm not sure exactly the entire situation. I think that you had to trade for him, which is with the trading deadline passed. Not a thing. I'm not sure. Broncos kicked the tire on Snacks Harrison because I'm really worried about our run defense now without Mike Purcell. And if Snacks Harrison is on a roster, there's just a moot point. But if he's a free agent, okay, so never mind. I was gonna say if he was a free agent, then yeah, I'd actually like to grab that. Good question there, Gary. I appreciate that. Grab a couple more before we get out of here really fast. The run defense is going to be okay. Relax. Hey, the Broncos run defense is actually one of the better parts of this defense. The Broncos have a top 10 defense.
Well, I mean, it was great for so many weeks, and then we lost Mike Purcell, and it went to crap, really.
Yeah.
So that's the concern, is we've seen what they can do with Mike Purcell. We've seen what they can do without. Can they fix it without Mike Purcell?
And the Falcons are actually not doing great in rushing this year. They are only averaging 108.6 rushing yards per game. It's 19th in the NFL. For as good as their passing attack has been, their running attack has not been very great. When they do get the running game going, it's because they're stretching the field vertically and they're opening up the box and letting Todd Gurley do his thing. For the most part, but they don't lean on that running game heavily like you would think that they would with a guy like a Todd Gurley, with a guy like a Brian Hill. They're just kind of ho-hum that way. So the Broncos actually could potentially have a little bit of success here against them stopping the run this week.
But then the question then becomes, is it because that the Broncos defense was a good run defense, or was it because the Falcons are just kind of meh at it?
Yeah.
That's what the question becomes. I mean, if we're facing the Chargers or we're facing the Chiefs, I think it would be a whole different story. I'm not as concerned for the run defense in this game, but in other games coming up, yes.
Yeah. No, that's Las Vegas, the Vegas game this next week after the Atlanta game. That's the one that really scares me the most because Josh Jacobs has been playing such a great football here lately. Let's see here. Ernie, what's up, dude? How you doing? Thanks, man. We appreciate that. Wait for Von Miller in December. Yeah, as Eric said, if the Broncos do want to bring him back the last couple of weeks and if they need him for a playoff push there, then that's the one. I wrote about that a while ago that they could potentially have him back by the beginning of December. But he still needed to get into football shape and be able to play. But that was the positive prognosis. And he came out and actually said, I think it was on Instagram a couple days ago, that he could potentially be ready for the beginning of December. So We'll see where that's at. See here, I got a super chat if I can find my way to it.
It's right at the bottom.
I was gonna say the stream is really slow on my side here. Kenneth Booker, what's up, dude? Thanks for joining the show, man. We appreciate you. The D played well against Kansas City. Do we learn from our mistakes and make it competitive the next time around? That's just it, man. It's hard to predict because the Chiefs offense didn't have to play a great game against the Broncos defense. The Mahomes didn't have to have 400 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. They poked and plotted their way in the running game. Le'Veon Bell had a couple of nice carries. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was doing all right, but they had the key defensive plays, the turnovers. They had the pick six. They had that kickoff return for a touchdown. That's 14 points there. They had the fumble by Melvin Gordon, 2 fumbles by Melvin Gordon, including that flea flicker pitch over the top of Drew Lock's head there that put up another 10 points. So 24 points from the Kansas City game came by miscues offensively and on special teams, not because of the Broncos defense. So when you have something like that where you're getting 24 free points scored, you don't need to have Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball all over the yard, especially in a snow game. So that's where it's going to be interesting and see how this actually kind of plays out against Kansas City, because you don't necessarily have to play a perfect game, but you have to damn near be perfect to play against Kansas City. And especially with the way that the Broncos offense is playing, where it's so hit and miss, you don't know exactly what you're going to get. It's hard to project them being competitive against one of the top offenses this league has seen over the last 4 years.
Yeah. And I think that the pride point for this game is that they kept him 0-8 on third down. That is the point of pride for the Broncos defense in this one. Nothing else. There is nothing else to be prideful for this, because outside of that, the Broncos defense did not play well. They only rushed the ball 14 times with their top two backs, and they averaged almost 6.1 yards per carry with that. They did extremely well. They allowed a rush of 27 yards and a rush of like 18 yards to those backs. They didn't do well against the run. They didn't have to have Patrick Mahomes really step it up as a passer because of how the defense was playing and the points the defense put on the board and the points that the return team put up. So they didn't have to play a great game. But again, the point of pride is that they kept them 0-8 on third down. And that is, again, the only point of pride that the Broncos defense should have against this Chiefs offense.
I'm just curious as to what they did on second down that allowed the Chiefs to continue to keep time of possession the way that they did and continue to keep the ball in their hands. Because if you're going 0 for 8 on third down, that would suggest that you're having some struggles on offense. But what did they go on second down, on first and second down, getting first downs? I think they had 23 first downs or something like that in that game total. Like they had a lot of chunk yardage plays on first and second down. So
if you give me a few minutes, I can end up finding it.
Well, let's get out of here. I'll let you do that on your last take here in just a minute. But, guys, thank you once again for joining the Dove Valley Deep Divers podcast. We really appreciate you guys sitting in with us and projecting the rest of this Broncos schedule moving forward. You guys can follow us on Twitter by finding me at Sanderson MHH and for Eric at Erick Trickel. Also, while you guys are at it, follow at DVDD_pod. It's a podcast account, the easiest way to keep on in touch with what's going on with the Dove Valley Deep Divers. Follow at Mile High Huddle for instant news and analysis articles on your Denver Broncos. Keep in touch with what's going on with the entire Huddle Up podcast network. If you guys are into doing so, head on over to sportsbetting.com/Mile High Huddle for a risk-free week of betting up to $1,000. If you guys are on Facebook, make sure you become a supporter. Go to facebook.com/Mile High Huddle, click the blue support button, and you can become a supporter, much like a bunch of other people here. And if you guys are not in any way, shape, or form able to go to huddleuppod.com, get your merch or anything like that, if you don't, I mean, that's fine. It is what it is. But the easiest way to help this show grow and get into as front of as many Broncos fans as possible is, number one, subscribe wherever you're watching this show, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, does not matter. Like every video you guys see and share it out. Get it in front of as many people as you possibly can, especially if you love it. Now, Eric, what's that stat for us?
I couldn't find it. They had 17 first downs. Okay. 9 of them were, I believe, it was either 9 passing or 9 rushing, and then I can't remember, and I already closed the page, so I'm not going to bring it back up again. But guys, we thank you for joining us, and we managed to make it through the hour, despite both of us feeling not so great. And don't worry, Richie, we won't see the Chargers medical staff, and we won't see the Raiders either. The Raiders damn near killed it. They damn near killed Trent Brown. They let oxygen get into his IV, and it almost killed into his bloodstream.
Yep.
But no, we definitely won't see them or anything like that. Fortunately for me, I did have to get a test yesterday for it, and fortunately for me, it was just food poisoning. Just had to get it so I can return back to work. But we're hoping for a Broncos win, guys. And we normally don't say this, but I'll say it this week, is during the game day, make sure you guys join Mile Huddle on the game day thread that we have. And you guys can sound off with all the staff there. Unfortunately, I won't be there this week. My wife has Sunday off, and I'm going to be spending the day with her. It's the first day off that we've had together in months. So it's going to be just some time with her. Hoping for a Broncos win, as I always am. And we will see you guys next week, hopefully talking about what the Broncos can do to beat the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yep, absolutely, guys. That's going to do it for us here on the Dove Valley Deep Divers. You guys stay safe, take care, have a great weekend, and go Broncos.
Join Broncos Country's deep divers at milehighhuddle.com to keep the conversation going.